If you have a large harvest of plums, or you have a really generous neighbor who shares their plum harvest with you, or if you found plums at the market on sale, or if you're just looking for a really classic German plum cake recipe, I am going to show you today how you can make this really yummy traditional plum cake, which is called Pflaumenkuchen in German. Sometimes they call it Zwetschgenkuchen, and I will tell you a little bit why there are these two little terms. And I'm super excited to share this absolutely yummy recipe with you. If you're new here, my name is Anya, and I love sharing our simple homemaking journey and a lot of recipes, like German recipes. It's always better to wear an apron, especially when you're dealing with something as dark colored as these plums, because they leave stains on light clothing. First, we'll make the yeast dough. You can find a link for the recipe in the description box below this video. So first I am adding 3 cups of flour. Sometimes I like to use spelt flour, which works just as well as regular all-purpose wheat flour, or if you're very adventurous, you can also use einkorn flour. To that I'm adding a 1/3 cup of sugar, a good teaspoon of dried or instant yeast, and then I warmed up a cup of milk, just a little less than a cup of milk, and I added 3 tablespoons of butter to it. It's not completely melted, but that will just about do. And 1 whole egg. And now we mix everything together until we have a slightly sticky dough. So you can see that it's still a little sticky, but not so much that it's actually really sticking to my hand if I'm working on it. Now I like to cover it with a beeswax wrap. You can also use a plastic wrap or a damp towel, and we'll let this sit in a warm spot until the dough has visibly risen, but we have something to do in the meantime. With our dough resting back there and rising, we need to pit the plums, and this is a good moment to talk about the plums. These are the more popular plums that you can get in the United States. They are called Santa Rosa plums, and they're pretty big. As you can see, sometimes they vary in size, but I'm not going to be picky because these are from somebody's backyard, and so it's just going to be a hodgepodge of different sizes. You can see that these ones are smaller. However, the traditional German plum that is used for this recipe is what the Germans, the translation of plum is Pflaume. But there's also another variety that's called Zwetschge. And what that is like a little bit more oval, a little bit darker skin, more like this one, and firmer flesh. What that means is that when you bake this with the Santa Rosa plums, you get a lot more juice, and the Zwetschge, the European plum, holds up their shape a little bit better and won't release so much juice. In terms of taste, there's no difference. It's just sort of visual and aesthetic. So if you are lucky enough to find the traditional European plums, the Zwetschge, in the market here in the States, I encourage you to get them and make this recipe because it's going to actually look absolutely stunning. However, we're going to pit these, and I have this traditional carbon knife that are my favorite knives, and it has a little bit of a half moon shaped blade, and that is the perfect one to pit these plums. And it's gonna take a while, but that's perfect because we still need the yeast dough to be rising. I'm going to use a bowl to put the plum halves in here. And another difference between the German plums and the Santa Rosa plums is that the German plums, when you cut them in half, the pit comes right out, or the stone, and these ones you have to kind of cut it out a little bit. So they're actually a little easier to pit. So I've halved and pitted all the plums. I will leave them over here, and this is the ideal shape for me for making the plum cake. You can obviously use a bigger cookie sheet, and then you will get a flatter one or a higher one. That's entirely up to you. I have some parchment paper here that I will use to roll out my yeast dough. So I'll put this over here. So it is still somewhat sticky. I'm actually gonna use a little bit more flour to make sure I can roll it out. So I know that this is about the shape of my baking dish. And that's good enough. We'll put it in there, and then we can shape it a little bit more with our hands. Especially with these American Santa Rosa plums, I like to create a little bit more of an edge that comes up because of all the juice that will be coming out. It will be flowing over the edges here, but that's fine. It's just that it kind of contains the juice a little bit more and doesn't make the dough quite as soggy. And that's time to put the plums on. The plums, in the traditional German way, don't go onto the yeast dough like this. First of all, you're going to run out of space, and then you'll have a lot of plums left. But instead, they will be in a more upright position. And the fun part here is that mine are all sorts of sizes, and it's going to be very irregular. So I'll just do the best I can here. And you can slightly press them in. And you always know you're super advanced if you can put the plums on very evenly so that you don't have any empty spaces. That didn't happen to me today. And now we'll bake it at about 390 degrees for about 35 minutes in a preheated oven. And while the cake is baking, I'm gonna get ahead and make some whipped cream, because that is the traditional way to serve it. Bitte mit Sahne, please, with whipped cream. And you can either use the pre-made whipped cream in a can, or if you're old-fashioned like I am, I will pour the cream in a specific container that's perfect for whipping. And if you've ever been in Germany, or if you have German parents, you've probably seen this, maybe not quite with the teeth marks here from our dog. And then I'll just use my hand mixer and whip it up. So once it's just about starting to get a little bit more solid, I am adding vanilla sugar to it, and you can add regular powdered sugar to it and just a dash of vanilla extract. However, I have a recipe. I'm trying to put this down so it doesn't fall over. There we go. I have a recipe for vanilla sugar that you can find right up here. So you know it's done when it's super stiff and the attachments will stand in it, and then it's done. Kids in Germany always like to lick the attachments. When your cake is done, pull it out of the oven, and then I like to always sprinkle it with sugar mixed with cinnamon powder because that brings out the sweetness, and cinnamon is a really good complementary spice for the plums, and depending on how tart or sweet your plums are, you can adjust the amount of sugar. If you're not really up for making a yeast dough, because that involves a little bit more work, I have a recipe here how you can make a crumb cake that is super simple, and you replace the blueberries with the plums. And if you're looking for more authentic German recipes, I have an entire playlist down here. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen, and I will see you in the next video.